What is going on, guys? So we are actually going to continue our little saga on what are the most useful Pokemon in PvP from Generation. Today is actually going to be Generation 3, which we actually have quite a few of. I've been doing my pen and paper notepad thing like you guys have known me to do, and I got quite a few Pokemon that actually have 3 different move types, but there are a couple that I really want to point out and talk about because they not only do they have 3 different moves, but they also cover their weakness very well. So let's get into that. First on the list is actually going to be Sceptile. Now, notice that these are going to be in order of Pokedex number, not in order of any type of true effectiveness or anything like that. I'm just going straight down the Pokedex. So Sceptile is actually going to be a pure grass type, which means he's going to be weak to bug, fire, flying, ice, and poison, which is quite a lot. But he actually covers a couple of those weaknesses with his typings. So he actually has a flying type move being Aerial Ace, and he has a ground type move being Earthquake, which means that he actually gets to cover his bug weakness with the flying type move, and he can cover his fire type weakness with the ground and the poison type weakness as well. So he actually covers 3 out of the 5 weaknesses that he has, only leaving him open to flying and ice, but those could be easily covered with another Pokemon to kind of make sure you have the most coverage. I think that Sceptile is very, very good in terms of his move pool. He has 4 different typings, which is just phenomenal. Next, I wanted to talk about Swampert. Swampert doesn't really have anything special other than one single thing. He's ground and water type, which makes him only weak to grass. The problem is that his grass type weakness is a 4 times weakness. So it kind of sucks because he takes a ton of damage if they have a grass type Pokemon. But he does have Sludge Wave, which can actually prevent or can actually cover a little bit of that grass counter. The only problem is that they're going to be doing 4 times damage to you, where you're only going to be doing 2 times damage to you. So he's very good in that he only has 1 weakness. That's the thing that I like about him. So that's what he's got going for him. Unfortunately, I don't think the poison typing is enough unless you're going up against another Pokemon that is 4 times weak to poison, which... Next we have Ludicolo. This is actually one of my favorites. I don't know why I like this Pokemon so much, but he's just super cool. He's actually going to be a grass and water, which is a very unique typing, and that actually makes him only weak to bug, flying, and poison, which isn't actually bad. He also is able to learn Blizzard, which is an ice type move, which will actually cover his flying type weakness. So he actually does decent. His typing is really awkward, and the fact that he has grass and water type moves, I think makes him a very interesting choice and something that you probably shouldn't look over. Next we have Gardevoir. So you guys have seen this week I've been putting these Pokemon into spreadsheets and kind of getting scores. I thought Gardevoir would be an interesting choice considering that she can learn Electric, Psychic, Ghost, and Fairy type moves. But she actually was the most underwhelming Pokemon that I entered out of Gen 3. I think her effectiveness score from my spreadsheet was like 12 or 14. Like, it was really, really low. She just doesn't cover a lot, and she doesn't just... I don't know, it's just weird. She doesn't have a great move pool for her in general. If she had a Fairy type fast move, that would be great. It would allow you to run Fairy, Psychic, and Ghost much more effectively, in my opinion. I mean, because if you run Confusion, Dazzling Gleam, and Shadow Ball, she just doesn't cover a lot. I don't know, she's just weird. It's just a weird situation. With her Ghost type weakness, she does counter that with Shadow Ball, of course, and with her Poison type weakness, she does cover that with Psychic. So she does have 2 of her 3 weaknesses covered, but she's just kind of underwhelming, to be honest. I don't know, it's just weird. Next we have Aggron, which Aggron is, you know,
hated on by most these niggas with no cheese, no deals, and no G.
But I definitely wanted to include him because he can learn 4 different type moves, with being Steel, Dragon, Rock, and Thunder or Electric. He can learn 4 different typings, being Steel, Dragon, Rock, and Electric. Being that he is Rock and Steel, he does have quite a few resistances, but he does have a few weaknesses as well, those being Fighting, Ground, and Water, and the only one of those that he can actually counter is Water with his Thunder move for the Electric typing. So he's not bad by any means. I mean, his defense is insane. I don't think people should count him out just because of that. Next we have Medicham, which you guys saw me talk about Medicham for the Great League, which I think he is a great candidate. He is Fighting and Psychic type, which actually makes him only weak to Fairy, Flying, and Ghost. And he actually covers his flying type weakness with Ice Punch. So I feel like he's a very, very good Pokemon, and he's like perfect, literally perfect for the Great League. He can be maxed out at 1431 and you can go to town. Next we have Sharpedo, which Sharpedo is actually Dark and Water, and that actually opens him up to a lot of weaknesses, being Bug, Electric, Fairy, Fighting, and Grass. That's quite a bit, but he does cover his Fairy and Grass type weakness with his Poison type move, but he's left open to the Bug, Electric, and Fighting types, so he doesn't have that much of a coverage of his typings. But I mean, his attack stat is enormous, and he only maxes out at 2181, so he'd kind of be perfect if you need a really hard hitter, especially a hard water hitter for Ultra League. I mean, that's just, I don't think that his typing can really bring down this attack stat too much. He's pretty beefy. Next we have Flygon. Flygon's going to be a Ground and Dragon type Pokemon, leaving him open to Dragon, Fairy, and Ice. And those, in my opinion, those are probably the hardest ones to get through. With his Dragon moves, he does, obviously counter his Dragon typing. And then with his Rock move being Stone Edge, he does counter the Ice type move, which only leaves him open to Fairy, which that's not too bad. I mean, you can get him pretty high up into the Ultra League at 2500, so I think he's definitely a good candidate. And especially if he gets a Community Day in 2019, I think it's going to really shake him up, because hopefully he will get a different ground type move, or maybe Outrage. Like, Outrage would be kind of cool. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what they do with Flygon. Next we have Armaldo, which you guys saw that he was actually in one of my, I think he was in my Ultra League, can't remember. Armaldo is actually going to be a Bug and Rock type Pokemon, which actually leaves him open to Rock type moves, Steel type moves, and Water type moves. And the only one of those that he can actually counter is the Rock, because he has Water Pulse here. So he does cover one of his 3 weaknesses, but the fact that he has 4 moves really sets him up to have a lot of coverage. I mean, Bug, Rock, Poison, and Water, that's pretty good, and he's not bad. Like, his attack stats fairly nice, his defense is decently high, and his stamina is not too bad. So he's definitely worth looking at. He's definitely a good Pokemon. So we have Melodic, which it is kind of a weird case. So it's pure Water type, which makes it weak to Electric and Grass. And it covers the Grass type weakness with its Ice type move, but it also has Hyper Beam. And being that it's only weak to Electric and Grass, you could go for neutral DPS with Hyper Beam. Because of how powerful Hyper Beam is, it actually might be worth looking at. Now, Melodics are kind of hard to come by, because Phoebus are kind of hard to find, and then you have to walk it, and then you have to have the 100 candies for it. So it's kind of a difficult Pokemon to get in some areas, but I mean, it's really tanky. I mean, it's really beefy. It just doesn't have a huge attack stat, but it's definitely worth looking at. If it fits into your team, it's definitely worth looking at for sure. So we actually have Kecleon. Now, of course, Kecleon is not released yet. We have no way of obtaining him, but his move pool is insane. I actually put a star beside him because I wanted to make sure to talk about him here. So being that he is normal type, he's only weak to fighting, and he actually covers that fighting type weakness with Aerial Ace. So as long as you have Aerial Ace, you can do whatever you want to with the other two moves. He's very, very versatile. The only problem is obtaining him. So I definitely think Kecleon is going to be interesting, and especially he only comes in at 2,000, so you could easily get him into the Great League if you didn't power it up to level 40, which I personally don't think I would, or you could power it up all the way to level 40 and have a really good Ultra League. I just think it would be interesting to see Kecleon. It's really cool. Next we have Walrein, which Walrein is a ice and water type Pokemon, which means it's actually going to be weak to electric, fighting, grass, and rock. I actually included Walrein in one of my teams as well, and this is the reason why, is because he has water, ice, and ground type moves. So the electric type weakness that he has is actually covered by ground. The fighting is the only one that he has left open, because the grass is countered by his ice type moves, and his rock is actually countered by either the water or the ground type moves. So I think it's very, very good as far as him countering himself. He only has one hole, which is fighting, and it's fairly easy to stick another Pokemon on your team to cover that fighting hole for Walrein. Definitely think Walrein is worth looking at and worth putting on a team if you need that type of coverage. Next we have Salamence. I chose to put Salamence on this list because he has a very interesting moveset. He is Dragon and Flying, which leaves him open to Dragon, Fairy, Ice, and Rock, but he does have Dragon, Fire, and Water as his moves. And this means that Dragon counters Dragon, Fire counters Ice, and then Water will actually counter the Rock type weakness. So the only thing that he has left open is Fairy, which is pretty easy to counter. You can have one Pokemon cover that Fairy type weakness, and if Salamence is switched out and all of a sudden you have a Fairy type attacker in your face, then you can pull Salamence back in. Last but not least, we have to talk about Metagross. So Metagross is actually a Psychic and Steel type Pokemon, leaving him vulnerable to Dark, Fire, Ghost, and Ground. He only knows 3 different type moves, which are Psychic, Steel, and Ground, but the Ground type moving does cover his Fire weakness, only leaving him open to Dark, Ghost, and Ground, which of course that isn't, amazing, but he does have a very, very good attack stat, a very good defense stat. He's just a very, very good Pokemon all around, and especially if you have Meteor Mash on it, he's like 7th in DPS overall. Like he's insane. So definitely cool there. That is actually going to be it for the best Pokemon in Gen 3. Well, let me rephrase that. That is actually going to be it for the most useful Pokemon in Gen 3. Now, it is currently 1:52. I don't know if you guys can see my watch here. It's pretty blingy. I got some ice on my wrist. We are planning to go and try to find Lugia and Ho-Oh after 4 p.m. But, of course, there is a chance that we don't see any. So, here's to hoping.